Hello, I'm Stephan Schwartz, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Schwartz Report. This week, I want to continue something I started last week, how to make yourself a more creative person. Because I've been studying this for almost 30 years, and there are very clear patterns which, if you follow, will allow you to become more creative and to be able to fulfill your potential. So let me pick up where I left off last week. Clearly, intellect is important, but the ability to think and to open to non-local consciousness is also a big factor. This research that Friedman reported is confirmed by Edwin C. Land, the inventor of the Polaroid process. At the end of his career, he re-examined the work of hundreds of scientists and engineers who'd worked for him in his firm and concluded that the most significant discoveries made in his corporation were made by, and this is a quote, by some individual who has freed himself from a way of thinking that is held by friends and associates who may be more intelligent, better educated, better disciplined, but who have not mastered the art of the fresh, clean look at old knowledge. Thomas Kuhn, whose book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, is one of the most important books written about the history of science and its processes, makes this same point. He says, first-tier scientists look at things without presuppositions. They look at, just as Land said, fresh, clean looks at old knowledge, whereas second and third tier researchers mostly are more concerned with peer group acceptance. They don't want to stand out and be an outlier. They want to be recognized by their group as being significant. But the real breakthroughs, those come from the first tier, and those are people who look at things in a new way. So strong is this iconoclastic factor that it has become a part of our folklore. If you think about it, it's the cultural stereotype of the creative scientist or artist as non-functional, eccentric individual. Like all such myths, there's some truth in some cases. However, such an evaluation is too coarse to detect the central point. Considerable body of research exists that creativity is in some way a function of focus. So let me propose that this focus can be achieved either through neurosis, an obsessional focus, or through a dedicated, consciously assumed focus developed through something like meditation or even a martial art. Because as a culture, we do not provide effective and systemic training to achieve creative vision. And when it does manifest, often it is clouded by neurotic focus. Nikola Tesla, for example, was one of the towering figures of early 20th century science. His fear of germs led him to demand that everything on his table be sterilized and that at least 24 napkins be placed next to him when he sat down to eat. He was obsessed. He was a germaphobe. It was part of his brilliance. So what produces such an imbalance? Why do many geniuses cling to debilitating idiosyncrasies, perhaps without consciously understanding the relationship that they are afraid if they give it up, that they will lose their focus and thus their creative powers? So the suggestion that comes out of this research is that the development of meditation as a way of focusing is a clean, simple, non-complicated way of attaining the kind of focus that, on top of intellectual excellence, command of the data, produces creative breakthroughs. So if you are seeking to be creative, you can do yourself no better gift than developing the daily practice of meditation. The second thing, the deep knowing that a solution to the challenge does exist. Now, that's only possible if you have mastered your field. And it's critical for a second reason. It is the precursor to knowing, as opposed to believing, that a solution exists. As Einstein explained it, I feel certain I am right while not knowing the reason. This knowingness could be described as a leap of faith. Number 3 in these 6 steps, strategies of inward looking. And that's what I was just saying. It is essential to develop a technique of inward looking. And it can be all kinds of things, and there are many ways to do it. Years ago, when I was covering the early phases of the space program for the National Geographic Society, I visited Cape Canaveral, and while walking down a hall, I happened to see a group of engineers engaged in a dart game. Later that evening, I happened to meet one of those engineers at dinner, and I teased him about their spending the day playing darts. And he responded that it was his team's secret weapon. When we get stuck and no intellectual solution presents itself, he told me, we begin playing darts. And at first the conversation is about trivial things, but after a while someone is likely to offer a solution to the problem we face. And a little while later someone else will add something, and suddenly, as if a spark had caught fire, we'll all be talking about the problem again. I can't tell you how many insolvable problems we have solved in this way. The engineer's dart game, I realized at that dinner, is a variation of something experienced by all who strive for creative breakthroughs. It is a technique allowing the practitioner to enter into a relaxed, open-focused, intentioned state of consciousness. Clearly, understanding this process provides substantial promise for learning how to create these states. And yet the idea of espousing and training students or research teams in techniques which would increase their ability to focus is virtually unknown and in the educational and scientific worlds. If it happens, as it often does, it does so on a kind of ad hoc basis because they don't know that that's what they're doing, and they simply develop a technique when they feel thwarted. So if you develop and start a technique and become competent in it, it will make becoming creative and having a creative breakthrough much easier. 4, surrender. A surcease from intellectual struggle must occur in order for the breakthrough to take place. That's what all these people tell us. One must reach the eye of the intellectual hurricane, a place of peace and assuredness in order for the moment of breakthrough to occur. You have to surrender all of your preconceptions and instead simply allow yourself to open to this non-local state where some idea comes through which can then be developed. Darwin, for instance, describes how after years of collecting data, one day he relaxed away from his working place, and suddenly the keys of evolution fell into place in an instant. Descartes, famous for his mathematics, his way of thinking about science, said it came to him when he had 3 dreams in Germany, when he was a soldier. Alfred Wallace, who arrived at many of the same conclusions Darwin did at almost the same time, said that after 8 years of collecting specimens in the Malay archipelago, he contracted a fever, and after days of semi-delirium, just as had happened to Einstein, he experienced a breakthrough in which the basic principles of evolution's gradual change suddenly emerged in his rational mind. The French mathematician Jules-Henri Poincaré, struggling with a mathematical problem, reported that on 2 occasions major breakthroughs came from thin air, one as he was walking across the street. Friedrich Nietzsche states that also sprach Zarathustra came to him while he was walking through the woods beside Lake Silvapana. He saw the story in a moment, but it took him months to write it out in his vision. Same thing that Brahms and Beethoven say. They hear the music, but then they have to write it out. Given the commitment to do so, could we in fact develop training processes which could create the conditions for these kind of creative breakthroughs? Research since the 1970s by teams at such institutions as Harvard Medical School and the Menninger Foundation suggests a sound scientific basis for approaching this part of the process exists and is surprisingly easy to learn. Combined with research in meditation and altered states of consciousness, this has become a surprisingly large corpus of research. Although it was principally focused initially on stress reduction and psychophysiological self-regulation, it clearly suggests that these same techniques could be deployed in developing personal inward-looking discipline designed to enhance creativity. Even the sleep state has its role to play in this surrender. As I mentioned, Descartes had his breakthrough in the form of 3 dreams. Robert Louis Stevenson, the author, recounts how he would go to sleep asking the gremlins of my mind to write a story while I slept. And then he would wake up with these ideas and write them down. And that's how he became a historically significant writer. Physician and researcher Jonas Salk provides this account. I was walking across the Salk Institute once, and I asked him, "Where did you get the idea for the polio vaccine?" And his answer was, "Intuition is something we don't understand the biology of yet, but it is always with excitement that I wake up in the morning wondering what my intuition will toss up to me, like gifts from the sea. I work with it, I rely upon it, It's my partner. And that, he said, was how he discovered the polio vaccine. The way in which we do this, excellence, commanding the relevant information. So you command the relevant information. You develop a technique for attaining and sustaining intention-focused awareness. You surrender all your preconceptions. And then you come to the moment of illumination, the aha moment, as some scientists call it. Even the most cursory analysis of either anecdotal or controlled experimentation has produced subjective accounts of this moment of illumination. Typically, researchers hear participants say, "The images are all there as if it were a hologram hanging in my mind." Indeed, so strong is this aspect that Arthur Koestler coined the term holons to deal with this inpouring of comprehension. So you've now had this breakthrough insight, but the sixth step is still critical. Intellectual explication and verification. Once the moment of illumination has taken place, the conscious, analytical, synthesizing intellect comes back into play. Descartes gives a clear example of the process when he says that after his dream, it took him the rest of his life to make his visions intelligible to others. There's also the necessity to winnow the valid inspirations from erroneous ones, because not everything that comes through may be correct. You have to test it, and that requires the special skills of the intellect. These 6 steps that I've just described to you are a natural rhythm. It suggests that you, whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you seek to do, if you wish to become a creative leader in whatever field you're working in, if you employ these 6 steps, you can come to better understand the relationship between creativity, non-local consciousness, and innovation. And you can make yourself a creative leader. And we need these people. We need you. Because as we go into climate change, as we go into something that is going to change the entire matrix of life on Earth, creativity, the ability to leap into new perspectives using these 6 steps is going to become a critical part of our future. I hope that what we covered last week, this week, and actually the week before will help you to materialize your own creativity, and that you will use it to foster well-being. If each of us would develop the potential of our creativity and put it to use to foster well-being, we'd have a nicer society, a better world. And once again, I want to tell you that there are, as there always are, references that you can get to that will give you many other sources that you can dig into if you have a mind to pursue this. But what I hope is that I have been able to give you information which, as I said, you will use to promote well-being with your greater creativity. Thank you.